Welcome to the Mindful Escape podcast. My name's Leighton Jewett and I am your host. And today we have Brian on the show. This is an amazing episode because Brian has actually written a book about taking the leap and leaving your corporate job. He gives tips, tricks, and advice about things you can start implementing today if you're thinking about leaving your job within the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. He also talks about his journey about when he left the corporate world 9 years ago, the challenges, the lessons, and the advice that he would give his younger self. This is a great episode, so I hope you're sitting comfortably and we'll jump straight in. Brian, welcome to the Mindful Escape. Thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to.
Thanks so much for having me, man. My name is Brian Gallagher. I created a platform called Simple Man Guide a number of years ago, mainly because I was frustrated with the overwhelm of information in the fitness space, but it's kind of morphed into something much more kind of robust at this point. And what I do now is help people leave the corporate world, find work that they find more fulfilling, or create work that they find more fulfilling for themselves and live life on their terms, which is exactly what I've done over the past. I just had my anniversary, what I call Freedom Day, that my last day of my corporate job was February 20th. I just passed 9 years this year.
Wow. Okay. That's great.
Yeah.
And I love Freedom Day. I think I'm going to steal that.
Coming up. Go for it.
I'm coming up to 10 months. And as I was saying earlier, I wish I had read your book 10 months ago. It was...
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, really, really great. So tell us, let's jump back. What was your trigger? What made you make this leap to change your life?
Yeah. Short answer, I got fired. Long answer, I had a bunch of other kind of signs that were coming up. The main one was that my friend and former colleague had an idea for a fitness studio that I was very interested in working on it with him. He basically positioned as like, I have an idea. Do you want to work on it with me? And I was like, absolutely, yes. I'd already started to grow kind of disheartened with my career at this point, not because it wasn't going well. And it's not because I hated my job. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. And I just thought, if I'm going to spend this much of my waking hours doing something that I don't enjoy and dedicating mental energy to something that I don't enjoy, I mean, why not try to find something that I could really love? And I've had a passion for fitness since I was a teenager, and this just seemed perfect. So the two of us got started working on it. Our only kind of plan or kind of thought or goal was keep going until something tells us to stop, like that it wasn't going to work. And we got all the way until we had our own studio. We signed a 3-year lease for a space in New York City. About 6 weeks before the lease was supposed to start, we decided, we're like, okay, one of us needs to leave our job and kind of like be behind the scenes and get this thing working out. So we decided it was going to be me. I'm 5 years older than him. I had more money saved. I was like, I'll do it. And I was going to quit March 3rd. And I know that because my bonus check was going to hit my bank account. I was like, after it hits, I'm out. Well, February 20th, I got to let go. And it kind of like set the wheels in motion, just 10 days faster. But everything worked out, and I just pictured it as such a sign that like I was making the right move, because there's a lot of stuff that goes into, I mean, this is fresh in your head, man. It's scary shit when you're like, am I going to leave this job? Am I going to go try to make money for myself? Am I going to be forced to eat what I kill, instead of just kind of coasting along emotionally stable in a corporate job where like, I always think of it as like, as long as you don't mess up, every 2 weeks, there's money in your bank account. So it's a big leap, but I had a couple signs before too that I was like, man, this is just not the thing that I want to do. And if I'm serious, I need to start like making plans. And one of them was, this really stuck out my head because I was probably a couple years into my job. I was about 28 maybe. And I had a summer weekend plan with my girlfriend. We were going to take the train down to our hometown, and we're sitting at her house, and her mom, her sisters are all sitting in the pool having drinks. And I had gotten an email on the way down that said, we had a ton of work to do. We had a client meeting on Tuesday. And I was like, shit, man, I knew my weekend was trashed. And I'm sitting on the conference call, and my managing director, like my boss for this project, was also on the phone with me and hopping on these conference calls and listening to these clients' demands. And I'm like, thinking to myself, I'm like, man, what am I working towards? That's going to be me. And at 41, 42, like getting my weekends destroyed and like not being able to control my time at all. I'm like, no way, man. I need to do something different. Like that's fine for him. And I know this job is like a lot of people aspire to do it, but it just wasn't what I wanted. So it like got me starting to think. And I mean, it took me a number of years after that to kind of make the move, but there was a couple other signs along the way, but that was the one that really stuck out for me. That was like, and I share this with people all the time. I was like, look, do this today. Like literally, I'll write posts where I'm like, if you do nothing else today, do this. Look at the people 5 to 10 years ahead of you. And if you don't want to be in their role, you don't want their lifestyle, start planning to make your move now. Like literally start now. And you don't have to quit your job now, but there are so many things you can do right now, like build your 6 month savings cushion. Start to think about something that you could do that you are interested in, that you have curiosity around, and start to play around with figuring out how you can kind of expand your reach in that area, start to create content around it. There are so many things you can do right now while your 9 to 5 job pays your bills.
Absolutely. And were you in the fitness industry before, or it was something completely different?
No. So I was in accounting for 2 years. I was in investment banking for 9 years. And then I was in fitness for, call it 5.
Okay, fine. So
Yeah.
the fitness was more of a passion for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I went the traditional route and went into accounting, finance. I wanted to go into something fitness related, man. I'll tell you, I didn't know what it was. So I thought I wanted to be a gym teacher. High school gym teacher was like my ultimate like goal, you know. It's like, man, these guys got to figure it out. They wear gym clothes all day, they hang out with kids and like play games. It's like, it looks fun as hell. And then I started to think about like people started telling me to go to college, and I'm like, I didn't really want to go at first. And I was thinking about physical therapy, and I remember people saying like, oh, you're going to be taping ankles for the rest of your life. I'm like, man, what the hell do I do then? It's like, I don't like any of this other stuff. I don't want to go to school. And I remember I had one of my friend's dads came up to me, and he was like a professional in the insurance industry. And he's like, are you going to go to college? And I was like, no, I don't really want to. And he's like, you're an idiot. He's like, you're the smartest one of these guys. You should absolutely go to school. I'm like, okay. So I just decided to go. And then I ended in finance somehow.
Yeah.
Like, all right. Yeah.
That's crazy, isn't it? And it's just the little things that happen along the way that determine the route you take.
It was so funny too, man. The funniest thing I find about this is that when I opened the fitness studio, we branded it. It was called Throwback Fitness. It was like we branded it to be like nostalgic, like taking you back to your high school days and like field day, gym class, all that stuff. And our uniform that we decided, because we could create anything we wanted, we went old school gym teacher uniforms, like the shorter kind of shorts, the golf shirts. So I ended up wearing a gym teacher uniform anyway.
Yeah.
Which I just found to be hilarious because I like wanted to be a gym teacher.
Yeah, you made your dream come true.
Yeah, I did, right? Just the universe telling me like, we're gonna get you there. Don't worry about it. We don't know how, but we're gonna get you there.
Absolutely. So tell me, obviously there was a bit of a transition that happened there. And I'm sure there was a lot of challenges that arose during that time. Was there one or two maybe big challenges that came up that really stuck with you?
Well, I mean, once I started to have these feelings that I wanted to leave, the biggest challenge was figuring out what I was going to do. So there was a pretty big gap between me figuring out or starting to think about trying something else and wanting to do something else before my buddy had approached me with the fitness studio idea. So there was probably 3 or 4 years where I'm like, man, I need to get out of here, but I don't know what else I can do. And that was probably the biggest challenge. I was starting to save money. I had paid off all my like financial obligations, like my school loans, and I had a pretty nice chunk of change saved up where I usually recommend at least 6 months. I think I had maybe 12 months at this time. So I knew I could go out and try something, and I didn't need a paycheck right away. And that was something that it didn't make sense in my head because I came from a middle-class family, all kind of laborers, and like everybody worked. They worked all day, every day. And like, if they didn't work, they didn't get paid, you know? So it's like, man, I have to work. What am I going to do? So me trying to take some time off and just go and like not work while I figure out what I'm going to do was so foreign to me that was probably a big challenge for me. And then just not knowing what I was going to do. And so that's one of the main things that I kind of help people figure out now is think about what you want to do and spend some time kind of researching it. Now, you don't have to research it while you're not earning a paycheck. You could be earning a paycheck while you're exploring these other things. But the way I like to think about it is like spend 1 year kind of really digging deep into what you want to do. I did not do this. So I can say this with hindsight. And I think I can help people land a lot closer and a lot quicker than I did to what they would enjoy. Spend 1 year figuring out what you want to do, or you're going to spend 40 years doing something that you don't want to do. So to me, it's like, it's a very small trade-off, like for you to actually just invest the time. And again, you don't have to do that while you're not collecting a paycheck. That I think is the most important factor. Like just do the exercises now to start to figure out where you want to go.
Yeah, that's really good. And there was something you said there about not working every day didn't feel right for you. And something that came up for me and a lot of the people that I'm speaking to right now is this story that we tell ourselves that we should be doing certain things. Are there any tricks and tips that you give in regards to people changing their mindset and coming away from that, I should be doing X?
Yeah, I mean, don't listen to anyone who hasn't done what you want to do. So if you're taking advice from somebody, and I did this unknowingly, and I am not saying this in a bad way, but I listened to, say, my dad, who was like, go major in finance. And he didn't know, he didn't work in finance. And what he did for me was just lead me into what would be the easiest way for me to be employed. And not in a bad way, because that's his mindset. Go get a job. You need to get a job. And I understand that. And he did it from the ultimate like place of love, like figure your stuff out so you can like take care of yourself. I mean, I understand that. But when I think about it now, it's like, and I didn't know at the time, and I didn't do any of the research on my own to kind of figure out what I could do with what I enjoyed. I just kind of listened. I mean, think about it. You're 17 years old. You have people that are 30, 40, 50 kind of telling you which direction to go. It's very ballsy and very difficult to be able to stand up to them as a kid and say, nope, I'm going to do it this way. I didn't have the strength to do it. I just didn't know. So I think like one of those things that I would suggest is like find people who are doing what you want to do and ask them for the advice. Try to block out everything else. Now, blocking out advice from people who care about you and are older than you is very difficult. And if you learn how to do it, please teach me, because I'm not sure I can do it 100% now, but I've gotten a lot better at it, at kind of blocking out what I know is caring, loving advice, but not the most practical for me to take with respect to where I want to go. So yeah, if you can do that as a young adult coming into your career, I think that is going to help you immensely. And I think we're seeing a lot more of that now too. I think a lot more people are coming into a career like this with eyes wide open, and they know they can find something that's a little more flexible, a little more fulfilling, a little more meaningful to them, and they can do it on their own terms. Now, I would love for everybody to be able to do that, but I know that a lot of times it takes a corporate step, and I'm not against the corporate step. It's like, I never say corporate is bad. I only say corporate is bad is if you hate it and you are spending every day doing something you don't like and you think there's no other way. Then I'm like, okay, now we got a problem. Like, corporate sucks for you. If you like your job and you're in corporate, I'm not talking to you. Like, you don't have to listen to me. You can tune out. But if you're not happy with what you're doing, I think there are things you can do now where you don't have to stay there for the rest of your career.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of good things about being in a job in terms of learning opportunities and things like that. And as you say, if you don't know what you're doing, it gives you an opportunity to get a paycheck and start thinking about, okay, what am I passionate about? What do I love doing? And where should I focus my energy on if I decide to leave this job? And the other thing I was going to mention about what you said about advice, loving advice from our parents, is that it's the best advice for them, but it might not be the best advice for us. And
exactly.
It comes to time and generation as well. It's a different time now, right?
Yeah.
So Things have changed.
Totally different. There's so many more opportunities to do things on your own now, and at a much less capital intensive way. So think about like starting a business 40, 50 years ago. You may need employees, you may need a building, you may need machinery, there could be all different types of things. I think it could be seen as a lot more difficult to start a business because there wasn't as many opportunities as there is now to just hop on the internet and start writing. Like, you don't need shit for that. You need a computer. That's it.
Yeah.
You don't even need your own computer. You can go to the library. Like, there are so many ways to start something now without any money, that I just think it could be difficult for people to grasp that haven't grown up in this generation, at least any older than I'm barely I'm hanging on to the millennial generation as best as I can. I call myself, jokingly, I'm the oldest millennial, but I think I missed it by a year, but who knows? But I call myself the oldest millennial because I connect with that mindset the closest of any of the other ones out there.
Whatever feels right for you.
So I'm sticking to it. I'm the oldest millennial, by the way.
Great. Cool. Let's talk about lessons that you've learned, and I'm sure there's been loads. Are there any major lessons that stand out for you along your journey that you think you'd like to tell us about today?
Yeah, I got a couple. I would say here's a big one, for me anyway. And I always think about this when I'm going to make any purchase. The joy from any material purchase is all in the anticipation, and it's fleeting. So why is that important? Because you don't need to know what you want to do for work to build your 6-month savings cushion. And not wanting to spend on everything out there is going to help you build that cushion a lot faster. And I'm talking everything. I'm talking clothes. I'm talking cars. I'm talking alcohol. I'm talking house, like everything. All that stuff is all in anticipation, and it's all fleeting. So once you have something, it just becomes the new normal. And I think that is crucial, because even if you have no idea what to do, you can build that savings cushion starting right now while you're staying at your job, and you can stay there until you figure something out. And if you have 6 to 12 months of savings in your bank account, that gives you options. That gives you lots of options. So that's one. The second one I'd say is, now I picked this one up as we were starting the fitness studio. So we went out, we were like good little investment bankers. We created this really nice business plan. We went and talked to people in the industry. We talked to investors. We talked to bloggers. We did this for 6 months. And we did so well at it, we even got written up in the New York Times before we even taught a class. We didn't even have a studio yet. And we looked at each other, we're like, dude, we don't even know what we're doing. We haven't even taught a single class yet. So we went out and bought equipment, and we subletted a space from somebody, and we started teaching classes. Now, our concept was rowing based. And what we did with the people that we invited to class was all free, family and friends of friends. We were like, tell anyone you know, come to class for free, but they have to fill out this 10-question survey that we had. And we had about 100 unique survey responses over the course of 6 to 8 weeks. And the biggest piece of feedback we got was that rowing was boring. Rowing was like a massive part of our class. We're like, holy shit. We're like, what do we do now? And so that, to me, was just telling us, like, look, we did so much planning and so little action that if we would have reversed that, we could have found out things much sooner than we did. We would have changed a lot of our stuff, and we were able to kind of salvage the concept and the name and the branding, because we already spent $6,000 on branding, and then we found out people don't like rowing. We're like, shit. So we made a bunch of mistakes, but the biggest lesson out of that was plan a little and take a lot of action and get that feedback loop started pretty quickly. Find out what your customers want, build it. And we were big believers in the lean startup method from Eric Ries, which is a book basically saying, if you hear people talk about the minimally viable product, get your smallest piece of your product out there, start having people talk about it, give you feedback, and then add as you go. Don't build this huge, robust thing. Like that's exactly why we didn't go build a $500,000 studio, raise money and everything, because like, we don't know if it's going to work. We don't want to be stuck with that. So plan a little, take a lot of action. I think those are the two biggest ones, at least, to get somebody started, that I I would be happy if they walked away with those two things. And the thing about looking at the people 5 years ahead of you, I'd feel content if people walked away with this podcast episode with those three things in their head. I would feel happy. I feel like my job is done.
Great. No, they're all really good. What we'll do now, let's jump back to when you first started this journey. What piece of advice would you give your younger self?
Man, I would say this. I would say do more of the things you enjoy doing. Like pay attention to what you enjoy doing and do more of those things. And the reason I say that is this, because it's how I landed in coaching. It's literally how I landed in coaching. So after we closed the studio down in 2017, 18, we stopped teaching classes. I started to get the feeling or the urge that I didn't want to be in New York City anymore. I was there 13 years already. The things that drew me to New York City when I was 25 are the same things that repelled me at 35. So it was time for me to go. After we closed the studio, I basically retired. And I was like, I'm just going to travel. I literally got rid of all my things. I drove a box of stuff to my parents' house. I took a backpack. I hit the road. My first stop was Ecuador. I did a 1-month yoga teacher training in Ecuador. After I basically retired, my only objective was to go and around to all these places and find the most unique spot to work out and share content about it. That's the only thing I did. And while that kind of helped grow my Instagram audience and people were interested in the workouts and where I was, they seemed to be more interested in like how I was living this lifestyle and what I was doing for work. And that's when the light bulb started to go off for me. It was like, I can help people do what I just did, which was leave a corporate job, start a business, kind of figure out what I want to do that's a more fulfilling path for me. And once I started listening to the signs and listening to the questions, I started to say like, okay, look, I'm going to offer coaching. I'm going to help people do what I did. And right away, I had 2 people that were interested. And that was September of 2021. And so about a year and a half ago. And that's literally how I got into coaching. I couldn't have done it right out of my corporate job because I really gained a lot of experience that I'm able to pass on. But I feel like by paying attention to what you like doing and doing more of it, it does a few things for you, man. It puts you in a better mental state. I think it brings with you a curiosity, which just allows you and kind of propels you to do things anyway without searching for a way to monetize it or anything. It's like kind of gets you out of that headspace for a bit. And it was a really nice transition from kind of working for a number of years in things that weren't ideal careers for me. Now banking wasn't. The fitness studio was a lot closer to that, but there are still things about the fitness studio that I would change about the setup. Looking back now, are things that I would never take again in another business venture. Things like a building, employees, other people's money. Like those are 3 things that are like, if somebody wants to start something with me and like those 3 things are involved, I'm like, absolutely not. Like, I don't want that. I can do it. I can do something without any of those things. So like paying attention to those things with respect to the fitness studio, it would have eventually got me to something like I'm doing now. It just took a little more time, and that's fine. But really paying attention to what I wanted will prevent me from doing that again, will prevent me from kind of making that same, not mistake, but like a misstep. That's like a kind of a distraction from what I wanted, which was like freedom and flexibility and the ability to work for myself, by myself, and offer something that I know is valuable to other people. So it is an indirect path to get me there. I think telling myself to pay more attention to what I liked would be probably the best thing I would tell myself.
Yeah, that's so good. I was smiling there because when I left my job, the only thing that was in my mind was freedom and flexibility. And you just said that, and I was like, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to what you said, I think when we're working our career job, corporate world, sometimes I know for me, I found it really hard to find the time to do the things I actually enjoyed and struggled to understand what I liked doing, what I wanted to spend my time doing, because I was so consumed in this industry. I was working in sales. It was like, where was my next deal coming from? It was so
Mm,
consuming that I didn't really pay attention to what I actually loved and what I liked to do. And now that I've got more time, or I have had more time since I've left, it's really enabled me to do, as you say, like figure out, okay, what do I love doing? How can I spend my time and don't even need to make money from? What do I just love putting energy into?
just yeah, and look, I understand that that comes from a position of privilege. You know, like not everyone is going to be in that position, especially right away when you start to have thoughts about route where this job's not ideal for me. It's not everyone can just up and quit their job tomorrow. I understand that, but that's part of the reason why I like to kind of review with people their expense level, their savings level, their income level, to kind of help them get to that 6 months of expenses as quickly as humanly possible, because that is when you can kind of take some time to figure out what it is you want to do next. And I think just knowing that you could leave the job and still pay all your expenses for 6 months is literally a life changing kind of realization for people. It's
Yeah.
a fear that you need to have that money coming in every 2 weeks, and until if you have all your expenses covered for a good amount of time, that fear kind of dissipates a little bit. And I think that gives you options and allows you to operate and act in a way that's not based purely on fear. Now, if you lose your job and you have 2 weeks of savings in the bank, like, yeah, there's a little bit of panic there. And it's like, what do I do? I go and claw my way into a job that's going to pay me now. I understand that, but that's why I would also, I mean, get that 6 months as quickly as you can. And yeah, it'll take some sacrifices to get there. But if you keep in mind that the joy for material things is in the anticipation and it's all fleeting, it will help. It will certainly help.
There was one part in your book which I really liked, and correct me if I don't phrase it
Yeah.
exactly right, but it was around clearing out an area of your flat or your house and starting with just a
Yeah.
drawer and just getting used to getting rid of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's super helpful. I mean, you find how much stuff that you don't really need. And I mean, it set me on a path, man. Like at one point, I came home from a trip where I spent 3 weeks on a mountain and just with a backpack and friends and food and a little bit of water. Like, and I came home in my apartment in New York and I was just overwhelmed with all the stuff I had that I just didn't need or didn't care about or touched once a year. I was like, man, what am I doing? And I literally got rid of just about everything, where to the point where my friends would come in my apartment or people would come in my apartment and like, oh, you just moved in here. I'm like, no, I've been here for about 6 years. But I just
Amazing.
emptied it out. I was like, man, I just don't need this stuff. There was so much stuff I had that I was like, oh, I'm never going to use this. I never touch this. It doesn't do anything to make me happy. It's like, how do I replicate what I just had on this trip in my life in New York City? And that was the closest way I could find to do it.
Yeah, that's so good. And before we finish up, I just wanted to touch on, because you mentioned earlier about the universe. And have you found that going on this journey, you've become more spiritual, or were you always spiritual, or how has that impacted your journey?
You know, that's a good question, man. And instantly, this is just like an instinct of mine. I always go to like religion when I hear spirituality, but it's not meant to be that way. Um, I do personally think that, at least from what I experienced, as you started to move forward towards what you wanted, things started to open up and you started to see things that you wouldn't have felt before or seen before. You started to reach people and come in contact with people that you haven't met before, and call it coincidence. I don't know. That's kind of the great mystery of life, right? Is it the universe? Is it energy? Is it God? Is it whatever you want to call it? I don't really know. But it gives you a sense of like, if I keep doing this, maybe good things will continue to happen. I don't know if you would consider that to be spiritual or again, like I used to be such a doubting person when I was a kid. Like I didn't really believe in God or anything. And everything was like, I questioned everything, which is still kind of like a mantra for me. And I couldn't land on an answer regarding religion that made sense to me as a kid. And I still land there. So the whether or not something is the universe or a sign or anything like that, I'm still kind of up in the air. But I feel like it does give you a strong sense to continue and to think that good things will continue to line up for you if you find what you're supposed to do and keep doing it. Now I know it's not easy to just find what you're supposed to do. It's not just going to pop in your head. It doesn't. I think there are ways to expedite the process and to ask the right questions and review the right things and think about other things that you enjoy that may not be related to work. There are ways to get there, but I think starting to go through those processes and take the steps, I think you will find that something is out there kind of helping you along the way. And again, I don't know what I would call it, but I hope that answers your question. But
yeah, it was a great summary. And I think it just comes back to leaning into what you enjoy and what feels right for you.
yeah, yeah. No, it's a good way to view it. Yeah.
Brian, thank you so much for coming on. It's been really good.
Dude, thanks so much for having me, man. I'm honored and I'm so happy for you that you're now 10 months into your journey. And dude, I'm excited to follow along and see what comes of it for you. And always here, man, to chat, lend an ear, whatever you want. It's been a real pleasure.
Amazing. And where can people find you online?
My website is simplemanguide.com. So that's Guide. You can find me on LinkedIn under Brian Gallagher is my full name. And I'm also on Instagram under Simple Man Guide too.
Amazing. Thanks again.
Thanks, man.
And there we have it. Thank you so much for listening. That was a really interesting episode for me because I really resonated with a lot of the experiences that Brian talked about. If you've been through those experiences as well, I hope you resonated. If you haven't been through those experiences, hopefully you picked up a lot of tips and tricks that you can start implementing into your day-to-day life. And if you didn't, make sure you get over to Brian's website and download his ebook. The biggest takeaway for me was leaning into what you enjoy. And we talked briefly about the universe and things moving in coincidences and signs, but whether you're spiritual or not, leaning into what you enjoy and what you love doing will help you along the way. Whether the universe will help you, whether you're just more passionate about it, or whether you just enjoy life more, people can feel that. People can feel the energy. And you'll go a lot further. And worst case scenario, you're doing things that you love. So I hope you enjoyed that. Make sure you click the follow, ring the bell. And if you think someone else will find value from this episode, make sure you share it with them. That's all from me. We'll see you next week.